I can't speak the language, but I do know the sport. And you're going to enjoy today's show too from Canton, Ohio at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We're going to be looking at some of the great Cowboys of the past and Cowboys of the future. And the Cowboys, oh, I'm kind of getting stuck on that a little bit, aren't I?
I think you're a little caught up on the Cowboys here, Norm.
Hey, you can get caught up with your favorite team and catch up with some great history from America right here in Canton, coming up on the Out of the Norm show. So please don't go away. The story is all about you today.
It's the Out of the Norm Show, where the stories are all about you, with author, musician, radio and television personality, and all-around nice guy, your host, Norm Allen.
If you want to start an argument in Ohio, probably the best thing to do is talk about football or politics.
That's for sure, Norm. This is the hotbed of pro football, and we won't go into politics today.
I don't think we have to. I don't think we have, unless it's a new rule changes. But that's for the ESPN to deal with.
Absolutely.
This is Mr. Pete Fearley, who's a new friend and an enthusiast as well. He is a Buffalo Bill fan, so we're going to let that slide. But hey, my Cowboys aren't doing much better either these days. At any rate, we're glad to be here, Pete, and we're at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, you mentioned earlier off camera, we were talking about it, that this is not the NFL Hall of Fame.
It isn't, Norm. We get great support from the NFL, but we are the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And today, your viewers are going to have a chance to see the birth of pro football, a document from 1892 that came before the start of the NFL. But when you walk through our museum, and that's really what we are a museum that preserves the history of the game, the big part of the story is the National Football League.
Of course, and the Hall of Fame are all Hall of Famer football players from the NFL.
For the most part, yes.
Let's go back to the first game. Where did that happen?
It happened outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and the game was evolved. It wasn't invented, it was evolved from rugby and soccer. And the start of pro football, we can pinpoint to November 12, 1892, because there's a game played out in Pittsburgh, and there's a player who was a ringer, brought in and paid $500 to play in that game. His name was William Pudge Heffelfinger. Great nicknames back in those days.
Pudge Heffelfinger?
Heffelfinger, yeah. So Pudge, though, was worth his $500 investment because he picked up a fumble, ran it in for a touchdown for the game's only score, and they won 4-0. The rules back then, no extra points. Touchdown was only worth 4 points, but Pudge Heffelfinger paid huge dividends on that first investment into paying players.
Now, in those days, was there such thing as a huddle, or were they still scrumming in those days?
Pretty much a game. If you watch the game back then, it was really resembled more of rugby. And so the game evolved from rugby and soccer, but didn't quite resemble the game we know today.
And it was almost banned in this country at one time, wasn't it?
It was. There was a lot of injuries, and as visitors go through our museum, they see the evolution of the football helmet, but in the early days, very primitive, a lot of injuries, and so protection has come a long way in that time, and we tell part of that story as you walk through the hall. Also, the rules changed a lot too. Huge changes in rules. Early days, you only ran the football, you couldn't pass it. The pass wasn't legalized until 1906, and really for about 3 decades it really evolved until there was open passing in the NFL.
And President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, helped save the game.
That he did. He just trying to get better protection on the game, and pro football growing and adding rules to help protect the players, and I think that's really what sets the NFL apart as you go through the story, is just as it continued to make the game better. And we saw in the 1930s, pro football for the first time really split from college game, changed its own rules, tried to open it up, added a more solid base from franchises in the NFL being in larger cities than some of the smaller towns that it started out in.
So it started out in college then, basically, before we went to pros altogether.
Yes, college was the big, when pro football began, and certainly the NFL, which was founded here in Canton in 1920, was not really on the sports scene at the time. College football was played in large cities, as was pro baseball. Pro football was played in small towns like Canton and throughout northeast Ohio into western Pennsylvania, and it really wasn't until really into the 20s where you started seeing more larger cities show up. Some of the smaller towns started to lose those franchises.
Some interesting names too. The Cantons they were the Bulldogs?
They were the Canton Bulldogs. They were the Akron Pros. As you study the game, you see that baseball was so successful that football copied it. So you had the New York Yankees, the Cleveland Indians, the Detroit Tigers, Cincinnati Reds, all NFL teams. Brooklyn Dodgers copied them right down to the names, but not all of them. Chicago Bears, George Halas, who considered the Papa Bear of pro football, since there were the Cubs in baseball, he thought football was a bigger and brutal sport. So they're the Cubs in baseball, it must be the Bears in football.
Gotta
so
be
that's
a
where
little
that
bit bigger.
Absolutely.
Well, the story is going to continue with a bigger story on the story of pro football right here in Canton, Ohio. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't you dare go away, because the good stuff's coming right here on the Out of the Norm show, where the story's all about you.
With more stories about you, Norm will be right back.
Looking at one of the first footballs. Now, you said this is the oldest ball in the museum.
Yes, it's the oldest football in our collection, and as I mentioned earlier, the game evolved from rugby, and you can see why the shape of the ball changed over the years as passing was introduced to the game, but that's what it looked like back in the early days of the early 1900s.
Now, a leather helmet does no good. He may as well be wearing a baseball cap, right?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of protection there, and then they even came up for a very brief time, Norm, of that nose guard. But if you were able to hold that nose guard, you find out it's made of a very hard rubber, and so what happened is that actually did more damage than good. It broke nose, knocked out teeth, and some of the players, believe it or not, maybe played outside the rules and used it as a weapon. But you know,
oh, who would do that? Only the New Orleans Saints. I guess I have to be careful of that, don't I?
I have no comment on that. No.
Okay, he can stay off the record. I can say what I want to. That's the way it is. That's the way fans are, though.
That's
Everybody
right.
has an opinion. So the game has evolved, and one gentleman came into Canton, Ohio that made a difference in making a name and creating the celeb around pro football, and that was Mr. Jim Thorpe.
Yes, and that's why we have his larger-than-life size statue that fans see when they come here to visit. And he was really a legend of the game. The truth be told is, by the time the NFL came around, he was a little past his athletic prime, but he played in the pre-NFL days with the Canton Bulldogs, and he was the greatest athlete in the world. Olympic gold medal winner, and by him playing pro football, it did more to add to the respect to the game and really raise the level of the game, and he's very integral in pro football starting off, or the NFL starting off on a solid footing.
Well, him being an American, a Native American, he put Carlisle University on the map, didn't he?
He did. He was, he brought great fame to that. He also played for so many different NFL teams, and we were talking earlier, Norm, about an unusual team made up of all Native American Indians called the Oorang Indians. Played for 2 years, an actual NFL team that played out of Marion, Ohio, which is about an hour and a half from here. And so there's those early, he was an early gate attraction. When you see the football rounder, he was known to be a great drop kicker. Even past his athletic prime, he used to put on halftime kicking demonstrations because he was so impressive with the way he would drop kick a football.
Who were the owners during those days? Who owned a team? How did that work?
They were basically almost sponsored teams in the early years from a lot of the smaller towns. So you'd have business owners in a community who would sponsor. They used to be all sponsored by athletic clubs, and then you get businesses involved. In the early days of the NFL, some of the integral owners, everybody knows George Halas. The Pro Football Hall of Fame's address is George Halas Drive. He was a coach, an owner, and actually a player for the Chicago Bears, and he was one of the front runners as to really helping the game grow in a market like Chicago, a big city. In the 1925, the New York Giants entered the league. That was huge, getting the New York market, and we know of the Mara family that still owns the team today. Wellington Mara, and then before him, his father Tim Mara, who founded the Giants, are both members of the Hall of Fame, and they were very important because in order for the game to grow, it had to move in to some of the bigger cities and compete against, the big college programs, compete against baseball, and it really helped the NFL.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to another section right now. We're not going to take a break right now. We're just going to move on. So come on, go with us. We're going to take a look at the Hall of Fame statues. So the term museum and Hall of Fame are not interchangeable, are they? Because the museum is separate from the Hall of Fame in one way.
It is. The museum aspect of the Pro Football Hall of Fame is really the preservation of all of our collection, and we call them artifacts, all the shoulder, the shoulder pads, the helmets, the jerseys. Those are artifacts that we preserve. We have 20 million pages of documents on the history of the game, and that's all part of the museum operation. The Hall of Fame, though, represents the very best, and this is something that is really synonymous with Canton, Ohio, are these bronze busts here in the Hall of Fame gallery. Very dramatic, and I I always have to put it into perspective, Norm, is that there's 267 Hall of Famers. With this year's class, we're going to jump up to 273. And since the start of the National Football League, there's been more than 20,000 players who've made a regular season roster. Many more than that who didn't make it to that level, all dream of getting here, and then you come down to the very select few. And for us, it's very exciting. During the summer, we have a 10-day, 18-event festival that attracts over 700,000 people who celebrate our enshrinement. And then what's great for us is that we see the new class and what it means. When you're playing, you're focused on winning that weekend. You're focused on winning a Super Bowl ring. When it's over, this is immortality. And Deacon Jones, a famous defensive end who coined the term sack, he's the one who said that you can't get cut from this team. You're here forever, and that's really what hits home for all these guys when they get enshrined, is that this is the very best, this is here forever, and to see the names, you can go down name after name here of the great legends that made the game. It's a great experience for fans, and I come through this room every day, and it never grows old for me.
But the tribute also is more than just to fans, or I mean more than just to players, because there are several members of the Hall of Fame who are not players.
Yes, we have 3 categories actually: players, coaches, and contributors. And so a player and a coach have to be retired 5 years to be considered. A contributor, people like Pete Rozelle, Burt Bell, all commissioners. We have owners that are in here, and so certainly they are bestowed this honor as well.
Do they have the same criteria on being selected?
Yeah, the criteria, we have the Hall of Fame itself has no say in it. We help facilitate the process, but we have a very dedicated selection committee made up of members of the media, and it's a year-long process. And we start off with a huge number, over 130, typically somewhere around there, of preliminary nominees, and they get whittled down through a cut-down process. And then what's great about our process is that whole committee meets at the location of the Super Bowl the day before the Super Bowl, and they meet face to face for about 8 hours. And they've already discussed these guys, but now they're down to the final 15 plus 2 senior nominees, or guys who've been out at least 25 years, and they discuss them in great detail. And it's a private, very private room. What's said in that room stays in the room. We have an accounting firm that tallies the votes, and we all find out just like everybody else as to who's in the class the day before the Super Bowl.
So what is the limit on the number of people who can be inducted in one year?
Our current bylaws call for no less than 4 and no more than 7.
So you've been running about 7 then?
Yeah, typically, it changes from year to year, but this year we'll have 6 new enshrinees, but in order to have 6 or 7 under our current bylaws, one or both of the seniors would have to be nominated. So it's a process. If you go onto our website at profootballhof.com, explains it in great detail. But it's a process we think that works. And when you walk through this room and you see the names that are in here, I mean, it'll give you chills. Our enshrinement festival celebration is great. Every year when the new class gets enshrined, on stage with them are anywhere from 80 to 90 of our Hall of Famers who come back to celebrate, and that's a moment, that's a dream for any football fan.
What a photo op.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh yeah, and it's done right here in front of the building.
It used to be in front of the building. It's grown to such size that we moved it over to the stadium next door at Fawcett Stadium, so we built a huge stage. We have a video screen behind it. We have all those Hall of Famers sitting on stage with the new class, and it's then turned into such a great event for us.
And that's also where the Hall of Fame game is played.
It is. It's an unusual challenge in that we have our enshrinement on a Saturday night, and we have workers who work through the night to clear off the flooring and the stage, and the next day we kick off the NFL's preseason. This year we'll have the Saints and Cardinals getting things going here in Canton.
Well, that should be a very exciting time here for 2012. We're going to be in for a good one. We could look around this room, and we will, as we look at all the busts. I mean, it's just amazing, the names and the people that you see.
So this is a really fun connect. Started out the museum looking at something from the early 1900s, and now you're looking into something from the most recent season. It ties in the great history of the game. As
the game has changed through the years, has it become more star-oriented rather than team-oriented?
I think, a lot of times the question I get asked by so many people is like, what are fans' favorite part of the Hall of Fame? And it really comes down to that team identity. But of course, within that team identity are the star players. And so, you talk about, Dallas Cowboys, you're going to start off talking about Tony Romo. You're talking about the New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees. But that's no different than in the 1920s, the game grew on the shoulders of players like Red Grange and Ernie Nevers are in here. And they were marketed as really the team. So it was Red Grange's Chicago Bears, Ernie Nevers' Duluth Eskimos. So that star attraction protection has always drawn fans to the game.
And it's also kept the financing up where there could be good sponsorships and things because of those star qualities, right?
Absolutely, and that's I just when you look at the history of the game, it's a team sport. But it's within football, there's so much attention put on the individual player, and that.
Once the rosters are set for the year, which will be about the 1st of September, and we're ready to begin the regular season, how many people are on the field at any given Sunday?
Well, you have 53 players per team, and that fluctuates throughout the season as players are cut, injured, and replaced. So I'm not really good at math there, Norm. But
so we have what, 32 teams?
32 teams.
32 times 50, so a lot of folks.
Yes.
A lot of folks on the field at any given time.
We have experiences where a lot of those players will get an opportunity to come through here. The NFL engages a lot of a rookie education, and one of the parts they do is a field trip to the Hall, and they learn about the history of the game. And I think it's always interesting to see
who's going to be here.
Yeah, and you just see how the game has grown, and that's what we try to do here at the Hall of Fame. Is as a fan starts here, and they start at the very beginning of the game, and then they end up here, and there's a real connect, and you see how much the game has grown and how the passion is. But as much as it's grown and changed, it's still football, and that's what we all love to watch every Sunday.
Wow. I think I'd like to have a Lazy Boy franchise right next to the Hall of Fame so we can watch the games every Sunday.
Sounds like a great idea.
Well, this is amazing, seeing everything, not just the new stuff, but the older stuff too, and seeing how it has developed.
The great part of the sport is that they use this platform to entertain fans, but then there's just so much good that comes out of it.
And it's gone to Europe now too.
It has. In fact, we have a display on how the game has grown internationally, and we see it here. We're going to go into the Super Bowl gallery here in a minute, and we're going to see. We know the Super Bowl is broadcast around the world, but our visitors who come here, in a year's time, we get about 200,000 people who come through our turnstiles. They come from all 50 states, and they come from up to 60 to 70 foreign countries. So people travel all over the world here to make this trip to the Hall of Fame.
Which team is selling the most merchandise right now?
Well, the teams that win. So we're going to go look for some Cowboys and Bills stuff. I don't know how good we're going to have with
that.
They'll
be on the back shelf.
No, but we always see a trend. Super Bowl winners, the teams that win tend to be the top sellers, and we see a lot because of where we're located. We're not far from Pittsburgh. We're just down the road from Cleveland, right. Buffalo, Detroit, Cincinnati, all of those teams. We have so many teams that are within driving distance of us.
So a real fan can make the route.
They sure can, absolutely.
Even to Buffalo. Hey, we're going to be right back. We're heading over to the Super Bowl collection, and I think that's going to be interesting because you're going to see a real Super Bowl trophy and some rings. So don't go away. There's more good stuff on the Out of the Norm show coming up right after this break.
The Out of the Norm show, where the stories are all about you. We'll be right back after this.
It's amazing how not just the evolution of headgear and safety gear happens, but here in the back room, this is just amazing to see this stuff. I mean, we're looking through just helmets on a shelf, but every one of them have a story.
That they do, and Norm, your viewers are getting an area where we don't let anybody go into. This is the archives of the Hall of Fame, where we keep our collection. We're in the process of converting it into a much larger space to better care for these. And again, I keep using the term artifacts, and we call these artifacts because when something famous happens with them, we have a professional museum curatorial staff that take care of this to preserve it for generations. And so, like I said, most of our collection is hidden away down here, but there's a story behind all of these helmets.
This old leather helmet, this is just beautiful. What years would this have been used?
That was the era, the leather helmet, really in the 1920s, early 1930s. By the late 30s, going into the 40s, you started seeing the introduction of the plastic helmet. And with plastic came the ability to screw into it and add a face mask.
Right.
So they actually tried putting face masks on this leather.
It's actually fairly hard on the top.
Yeah, over time, they evolved. In the early days, they were very, very soft leather, and then they certainly got much better. And your viewers are probably thinking you're doing a fashion statement here with these white gloves, but what we do here is our museum staff makes us wear white gloves when we're touching this because the oils on our skin are actually can do harm over a long period of time. Right. So we try to take very good care of everything we have here.
Howie Long's helmet?
Yes, it is.
Well, let's look at that one right quick. Big-headed guy, and his decal is kind of beat up a little bit from where Howie Long collided with probably 300 pounds of somebody else at the time. Howie Long, how exciting.
So we have down here everything from Vince Lombardi's play sheets to the turf from Three Rivers Stadium where the Immaculate Reception happened to hundreds and hundreds of jerseys. And again, we use museum standards to keep track of all this information or all these artifacts and to preserve it for the long term.
This is Troy Aikman's helmet. Troy boy. He was always one of my favorites, and here's his helmet.
And we have a couple from Troy in our collection.
And you said this one is O.J. Simpson's helmet.
O.J. Simpson's helmet from his last year with the Bills.
Yeah, it's taken a few beatings on it too, hasn't it?
And it has.
But the inside, looking at the inside, you can really see the difference between Troy's helmet and OJ's and the kind of protection they had.
Absolutely.
With the padding that's in there.
The sophistication in the protection these days is just amazing, and
Beautiful.
A lot of research goes into that, but these certainly help tell that story.
Well, this is just a fascinating thing. It'd be fun to look at every one of them. So some of the tools of the game. Now this is a fan six pass, red-brown I formation. Who knows what it is? This is actually a play sheet from Vince Lombardi.
It is, and this is, of course, the 1960s. The Packers dominated the sport, and Vince Lombardi given so much credit for building such a championship, turning Green Bay back into title town. But you can just see the
so he would draw these,
and he'd put them on the overhead projector, and we have well over 100 of these plays that Vince drew up back during his days head of the Packers.
That's amazing. It's beautiful. Then there's all kinds of trophies.
Lots of trophies going back. We have, you name it. We have something here. We have an exhibit that travels around the country, focusing on military and football, how the NFL has responded during times of crises, and we have things like this for Rocky Bleier. We actually have his Purple Heart that's part of that exhibit. But here's something he was given after suffering very severe injury in Vietnam, coming back to play in the NFL.
Lost a part of a foot there.
We have an Emmy from NFL Films that they donated to us, and I'll let you grab that from the base because I don't have my white gloves on here, Norm, so I'm going to let you grab that and show. But NFL Films, of course, presents the NFL, the sport, like no one else, and they've won so many Emmys, and they happen to be nice enough to let us keep one of them.
Oh, it's beautiful. I'd like to thank all the folks at Rural TV for all of your support, and I hope one day I'll get to make that speech.
Someday.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
The Out of the Norm Show, where the stories are all about you. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, welcome back to the Out of the Norm Show. We are live in Canton, Ohio at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, except it looks like we're not ready to do any footballing today. It looks like we're building something today.
We are building something, Norman. It's the Hall's biggest expansion ever. We're growing from 85,000 square feet to 117,000 square feet, and a lot of the changes include this. This is how fans, starting in the summer of 2012, will be entering into the Hall. This is our new lobby. We've added on, and it's just, again, our biggest expansion. We're pretty excited about it, and all the grounds been under work here, under a transformation over the last year or so.
Well, it's been quite an experience for us. I really appreciate you taking the time to show us around, and I mean, this has been a fan's dream, is to come here and to see it from the way that we get to see it. It's really a privilege and an honor, and I thank you for taking the time to do that.
Norm, great to have you here with us today.
All right. We hope that the hero in you comes out today as you're heading into your day to get some work done or whatever. Just think, you may be the one in your own mind catching the touchdown at your job or at your home or in your relationships. In the meantime, we'll see you again very soon on another Out of the Norm show. No more hard hats after this one, because even though we're still building. We'll see you soon on another Out of the Norm, where the stories are all about you.
Loving the South and me just loving you.